You might reasonably have expected, with 500 years of colonial rule coming to an end, that it would be the Portuguese army parading in Nova Lisboa, but the Portuguese have fled in panic in what must be the most extraordinary abdication in anyone's colonial history, leaving the Angolans themselves to sort out who will govern their country now and in the future. They're trying to salvage vehicles sabotaged by the Portuguese as they left. They're learning how to fire the larger machine guns once used exclusively by the Portuguese. On Independence Day, the Portuguese government in Lisbon will not hand over legal power to an established and recognized single nationalist movement, but to three separate armies, each clawing for the biggest slice of the country and the greatest share of the power. The three nationalist movements fighting here are the MPLA, the Russian-backed Movement Popolare, led by Marxist Dr. Agostinho Neto, the FNLA, the Front Nationale, led by Roberto Holden, and UNITA, led by Dr. Jonas Savimbi, a socialist but anti-communist. But why should governments outside of this country be at all concerned at what's going on here among these three movements? Why should the governments of America and Britain, France, Russia, China, South Africa, and the neighboring black states of Zambia and Zaire be at all concerned at what's going on here? Well, the answer is simply gold, diamonds, and oil. That and the prospect that Angola might soon become the first fully fledged Soviet satellite in Black Africa. That's why Angola is suddenly important. The Western powers are aware of a communist Angola's potential to upset the balance of power in southern Africa. Russian influence here in this civil war is very apparent. At UNITA headquarters in Nova Lisboa, we were shown an impressive display of captured MPLA weapons. And for the first time, the Russians have supplied to the MPLA tanks and armored cars like these three captured only a few days ago. So the black Angolans, once united in fighting the Portuguese, are now fighting each other, communist against non-communist, with the big powers aligning themselves on each side. Michael Nicholson, News at 10, Nova Lisboa, Angola. Nova Lisboa, the second largest city in Angola, was second only to the capital Luanda in commercial and industrial activity, when the Portuguese were here, that is. But the Portuguese have left now, and street after street of their pleasant suburbs are deserted. More than 30,000 of them, who dominate the life of this city, have now fled in panic to families or refugee camps back in Portugal. They merely shut their homes, their shops, banks, schools, factories and farms, took with them their money and all the belongings they could carry to the airport, and wiped their hands of 500 years of colonial rule almost overnight. The soldiers alone maintain law and order and the dusk till dawn curfew that's operating here. Sometimes, as we drove through the city, we could hear gunfire. Perhaps someone had been found looting. More likely, someone had driven through a roadblock. Or perhaps a soldier from UNITA had fired on another from the Allied National Front Party that sometimes move about the city too. The Angolans here accuse the Portuguese of deserting them before time, leaving them untrained for the administration of the country and the cities. They also accuse them of deliberately sabotaging vital public service installations. They accuse Portuguese engineers of setting fire to the electricity station that powers the main water pumping supply, and at the city's central electricity generating station, they say the Portuguese sabotaged the diesel engines that drive the turbines. So much of Nova Lisboa is without light or power. There's no way of knowing whether their accusations are correct or not, but the Portuguese might well stand alone indicted by the way they ran away and left the hospital. Nova Lisboa Hospital was run entirely by Portuguese administrators, doctors and nurses. The dark wards are now full of war-wounded and civilian casualties. But this hospital is fast becoming a place where patients may only sit and wait, because as this civil war drags on, there is less and less medicine to give and fewer qualified people to treat them. The Portuguese once boasted that they, among all the colonial powers, had established the best relationship with the Africans they ruled. The Angolans might once have agreed. Now they are bitter. Bitter and amazed at the Portuguese sudden panic exodus, which must rank as one of the most extraordinary abdications in colonial history. Michael Nicholson, ITN, Nova Lisboa, Angola. If the Portuguese had done their job properly, these people ought to be singing about their independence from 500 years of Portuguese rule. But the Portuguese abdicated in panic, and these people sing instead about their eventual victory over other black Angolans in a war which they say in their song will last long after their sun sets. UNITA controls more than half of Angola and over half the country's 6 million people. It's a moderate party, socialist but anti-communist. It all looks and sounds so much like the early days of Biafra. The same war songs, the same expectations, even the same party colours on their flags, banners and hats, red and green. And like then, UNITA has its children's brigades, parading with much pomp and discipline, carrying wooden rifles. We were told that older children here have already died in the fighting, carrying arms. Even their leader, UNITA President Dr. Jonas Savimbi, looks so much like General Ojukwu. Dr. Savimbi, a graduate of Geneva in political science, fought against the Portuguese in the bush for 6 years, and he would be the leader most Western powers would like to support. The Portuguese hand over to the communist MPLA.
I think it will be a big mistake, because today, when we are speaking, at this date, MPLA is controlling less and lesser territory, and I think up to the November 11th, they will control lesser again. Then it will be a big mistake if they hand over power to MPLA, because it will be handing it to a minority government. Minority government in political sense, because the MPLA have run away from elections. In the military sense, because they will be controlling less territory than UNITA and the FNLA together.
Is it possible that if you cannot make any further headway in negotiations or in it with a military offensive against the communist MPO, that you may form a breakaway state here?
No, we never thought about breakaway states. First, it is difficult, on my point of view, to see MPLA winning because it is 1 against 2. And again, we think that if MPLA gains some terrain during the last 2 months, it was only because we had no arms, and the MPLA, they had a lot of arms from the Soviet Union. But today we have equal arms, if not superior arms.
Where is your help coming from?
Coming from almost every country except from the Soviet bloc. We are not getting anything from that bloc.
What kind of help are you getting from South Africa? Are they involved in any way instructing you or fighting with your troops?
They are not involved in fighting with us. They are involved that their presence is here in Angola, and no one can deny it, and no one can do anything to stop it.
Can I just finally put to you that one of the biggest fears that's voiced outside of Angola is that Angola could well become another Congo. Is this a possibility in your thinking?
I think maybe it will not be just like a Congo. It can be more serious than that. More serious than that, because in the Congo it was only parties fighting without armies. But now here we have the 3 armies involved. And our people have experience of fighting. And I think it can become more serious in Angola if a political solution is not found.
The retaking of Lobito is certainly the most important victory in this civil war so far by the non-communist UNITA forces. It is the biggest seaport in the country. It's where the oil and much of the arms and ammunition come in, and where exports, including Zambian copper, go out. If the Russian-backed popular movement, the MPLA, were to win this civil war, they needed to hold Lobito. There was very little fighting here. In fact, the only destruction we saw was an arms dump blown up to prevent UNITA taking the supplies. Up until recently, before certain Western powers committed themselves, UNITA's arms and ammunition was almost exclusively captured weaponry. Even in this destruction, we could see how totally reliant the MPLA is on Russian supplies. If the MPLA failed to hold the seaport, their more critical defeat was in the African townships, the slums where the Portuguese confined their black working population. If the popular movement's ideology should have sounded attractive anywhere, surely it should have been here. They gave guns to the men and young women and told them to fight. Accordingly, the weapons were promptly dumped in the sea and water holes, and the MPLA discovered they lacked support in the one place they thought they could depend on it. Lobito and the rail terminal at Benguela then is firmly in UNITA's control. Its troops patrol the streets, and according to the few white Portuguese left here, some semblance of law and order is being maintained. But the most important thing for us here is that we now have proof that white South African regular troops were directly involved in the retaking of this seaport and are still fighting with and directing UNITA troops further north. Now, we've been in Angola for a fortnight now, and in that time a great deal of efforts have been made to prevent us filming South African troops and their equipment. For example, just over a week ago at Silva Porto, further east, we saw two brand new Panhan-armoured cars manned by white soldiers. We asked them where they came from. They said they came from London, and they said it with a very strong, obvious South African accent. We were not allowed to film by Angolan soldiers. They'd received instructions from a white civilian. Again, he spoke to them with a very strong South African accent. As we drove to Benguela Airport, we came across a roadblock of two Panhard armoured cars manned by white troops. Again, we were prevented from filming, but we tried to snatch what film we could. It was plain to us that all our film would be confiscated otherwise. Beyond the cars, I could see more white soldiers unloading ammunition cases in a hangar. Their South African accents were unmistakable. Of course, it was always possible until today that they were mercenaries merely recruited in South Africa. We had no definite proof that they were regular white South African soldiers. But we now have confirmation that the South African army has a base camp at a town called Sarabandera, which is south of here, but over 250 miles inside Angola. And we've also news that the UNITA leader, Dr. Jonas Savimbi, will see, or may already have seen, the South African Premier, Mr. Foster, in Pretoria, hoping that he can persuade Mr. Foster to commit the South African government and South African troops even further in this civil war. Michael Nicholson, News at 10, Benguela Lobito, Angola.